everybody. Welcome to the May 20th, 2015 regular monthly board meeting of the Lake City Development Corporation. Let's stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Brad, would you lead us tonight?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. We have a special guest tonight because Commissioner Hassel has submitted his resignation. He's come at our invitation so that we can recognize him a little bit. So as he works his way up to the table, and Al, if you just have a seat right down there, I think that would be nice at the table. I'm going to read a couple things here in honor of Al's service. So we got you a plaque, Al, and something else for your wall. It says, presented to Al Hassel III, Commissioner, Lake City Development Corporation, Coeur d'Alene's redevelopment agency. Your terms were 1997 to 2001 and 2008 to 2015. In recognition of over 30 years of public service to the community of Coeur d'Alene, your leadership, vision, and commitment were instrumental in creating public-private partnerships that will provide lasting benefits for the community. Coeur d'Alene is a better place due to your community involvement. May 20, 2015. And I want to just fill in the gaps a little bit in terms of Al's public service. He was first appointed to the Parks Commission in February of 1977. Al, correct me if any of this is wrong. He then took office as a council member initially on January 7th, 1986, and again on January 2nd, 1990 for a second term. Then as mayor, he took office January 4th, 1994, and during his term, this Urban Renewal Redevelopment Agency was formed in 1997. He then returned to city government in 2004, serving until 2012. Is that right, Al? Yeah. Another 8 years. So Al, it's with our greatest appreciation for not only having the wisdom and foresight of helping create this agency, but for your service to the city as a council member and as one of our commissioners. Thank you very much.
30 years.
30 plus.
It was fun.
Well, you made a big difference, Al.
Thank you. I tried.
It's been fun serving with you.
Been tremendous.
I have been, for sure.
Thank you.
We'll miss your meeting at your wisdom at our regular meetings, but you know how to find us. So if we err, let us know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we've got quite a board now. Well, I decided since I can't get here on time most of the time anyway, I might as well let somebody else do it for a while.
We'll miss you.
Yeah, catch us on TV. It'll be easier.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah, It's been fun serving with you all these years.
I can remember the day you called me, Al, and asked me to serve. And I don't know if you remember, one of the first questions I asked you, I said, well, who else have you twisted the arm to be on this entity with? And I was, I guess, impressed that you would consider me in the same company as that initial board. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for serving.
Was Al the one that started the rumor it was 2 hours a month?
It grew into that.
He knew Dave was gullible.
Worked for a few of us.
Yeah, that was the sales tool Kit took the street with. Only two.
Great. Any other comments for Al? Appreciate your coming down here, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dad. Thanks for everything, Al.
Yeah, please stick around. So next is public comment. Do we have any public comment from our audience in the room here tonight before we start our regular agenda? Okay, seeing none. Next, we're going to go to approval of minutes. We have the April 15th regular board meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
Moved and second to approve the minutes of the April 15th, 2015 board meeting minutes. Any questions, comments, or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Then we had our strategic planning session meeting on May 6, 2015, so we have minutes from that meeting as well.
Motion to approve strategic planning minutes.
Moved and second to approve the meetings of the board May 6, 2015 board strategic planning meeting minutes. Any questions, comments, or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I missed the second one.
Me too.
Oh, Mick was the second. Sorry about that. It was a quick second. Motion carries. Okay, next we have a presentation from Ginny Gilliam. Ginny's been, in the last few weeks, started her tenure here as president and general manager of the Jobs Plus organization and board. And I know we heard from you, Ginny, last week at your last couple weeks ago at the strategic plan. She said as she came in, it felt like deja vu, but we had this meeting pre-scheduled. Thanks for coming in. We just thought it'd be a good time to maybe get to know you a little bit personally, and then you have a chance to share maybe anything you didn't share with us at the strategic planning meeting.
I'll actually start with that one. So what I thought I could discuss today, because you've already heard about the strategic plan, is how Jobs Plus and Lcdc can really converge. So I think it's our focus on technology, whether it's aero and technology or just IT in general or health and technology is where we can really converge. One of the things we were thinking about is just continued support on that education corridor will really help us get to that point. Headquarters, IT possibilities in this area I think is really strong. One of the things that we're working on is with Innovation Collective so that we can really focus on that entrepreneurial development, and all the offices that we have in the area is a good possibility for that. Also just visited with Nick, and I know he's going to give you guys a presentation in June about a potential tech center. I think that has a lot of possibilities that I think will really help the community. The other thing is that when Tony and Denny took me for a tour, that area that you have that's potentially heritage land that somebody could possibly donate to the area. I think having a tech park or something related to technology in that area, education, I think will really help build our base as far as tech. So one of the things, an example would be in the Empire Unmanned. I think that is a convergence of aerospace and technology. Aerospace is already pretty tech-related, but that one is a really good convergence. It even has an agri-tech segment to it, because as they continue to map all the farms, of course, there's a potential to get maximum capabilities out of each plot of land. So instead of 60% production, maybe we can get to 80, we can get to 90, and then eventually if we can do that across the U.S., across the globe, it'll really help with food production. And as we all know, it's just less and less farmland, more and more people. So that combination would really help. So those are the areas where I really see that we can do a lot of crossover. I think our goals and objectives are very similar in that IT technology, health, aerospace segment. Okay? And then give you guys a little bit of background. I'm a UCLA and University of Michigan grad. So undergrad, UCLA, graduate school at University of Michigan in planning and urban renewal, except I got into the economic development side. As an undergrad, I actually started out as a biochem major. So up until my junior year, I was just flying along doing biochemistry, and I think it was finals week in this winter. And I kept going into the basement labs in the morning before it was light, and would come out and it would still be dark. I guess I was in there most of the time. And I think after a week of that, I thought, okay, I have to change major. I'm missing that big orange ball in the sky, and I just flipped everything around. So I ended up with bachelor's in political science, international politics, and turned all my biochem info and in classes into my general classes to meet my requirements. Came here to the U.S. when I was 10. So born in the Philippines, grew up over here near UCLA, went to school, came up to Idaho for the first time because I was working for a consulting firm, and they were working for Amoco, which was a Cyprus subsidiary of Amoco. And so the first time I came up here, I was in Southern California. The boss calls up, and I graduated early, so the boss calls up and says, hey, can you jump on a plane with the Amoco VP? Because he's flying up to Chalice, and we want you to see the site where you're going to be doing a lot of economic development activity. I said, sure. He said, bring all your ski gear, not the ski part, but all your warm clothing. I said, okay. So it only takes 2 hours on a corporate jet to go from Southern California to Chalice. We were circling down, and I could not see any place where we could possibly be landing in Chalice because it's like barely, it's all white, right? And then so the VP goes, you see that slightly dark spot? I go, uh-huh. That's where we're landing. And it was like hardly a speck in there. So we landed. It was minus 8 degrees that day. I have actually never been in minus 8 before, so I said, can you just close the jet doors again, please? I think I'll just stay in here. We did a tour of the town, which took all of 3 minutes, I think, because, you go up the street and down the street. And then I spent the rest of the day next to the wood stove. I dragged the little, because they just had a table like this. So I just moved it right next to the stove, and I think I was practically sitting on top of that stove the entire day while I was, doing the research that they wanted me to do. But anyway, ended up really loving Idaho, even though I grew up in Los Angeles, bigger speck if you're up in the air than the Chalice speck. But ended up staying in Idaho. Got back into, I ran several retail shops. Actually, I started them and sold them, like 4 different ones in a row. So there was a flower shop, interior decorating, a greenhouse, and a gift shop. I kept the flower shop the whole time because that one was I garden, so that's one of my passions. And then got back into economic development when my youngest son was a junior. A couple of girlfriends actually said there's an opening up in Salmon, Chalice jointly for a rural ED, and you're going to drive us crazy if you don't have a job other than, doing your flower shops when your boys are both gone. So I applied for the job, got that. Then was recruited to Pocatello, then recruited to the state to head up the economic development, except state process and me didn't quite go together well. It's a little bit slower than I normally work. And then this position came open, and I applied for it, and I am absolutely happy to be here. So there's the whole brief of I have 2 boys. So one's an architect in Los Angeles and graduated from the other school. So he's SC undergrad, but UCLA grad school. The younger one is at Johns Hopkins right now doing an accelerated nursing program. He was at NYU undergrad and then NYU Madrid for his grad program. So, okay.
Nice.
All right. Any questions on how we converge or anything else?
Question.
Sure.
You touched on a little bit of this at the retreat, but so you've had quite a bit of experience in Idaho now, and you've been around the Boise area, and Boise's been a fast growth area.
Right.
But is it a handicap sometimes? I don't mean anyone to take this the wrong way, but is it sometimes a handicap just being in the state of Idaho to recruit business and do economic development, or?
You know what? The biggest
what do you think?
handicap we have and the biggest worry people have is not our location or it's the workforce. We just don't have enough numbers of people. Even in the Boise area, it was hard to recruit because there's 500,000 people in the area. And so they start worrying about workforce, and in some areas we don't have clusters yet. So if they're recruiting an engineer, they're worried that this engineer only has this company to go to. Whereas if we're in a bigger area, let's say the Wasatch Front, where there's like 2.5 million just in that one spot, our 1.5 is spread throughout a gigantic state, right? So it's the number of the workforce that seems the biggest setback that we have. And there's nothing we can do about that. We're just going to grow at whatever rate. So in the meantime, we start to try to pick up the smaller, not really smaller, but not as big companies. so that we can grow them here, is what we're going to have to try to do. But as far as transportation, that can also be an issue because our airports don't have as much activity. But for the size of the companies that we can recruit, we can provide the air service that we have.
And around, so it's the sparse population
Yes.
in Idaho more so than lack of, government incentives and economic development incentives and so forth that
Yes,
you're given by the
more so.
legislature. It's
So
more-
if, according to the surveys right now, if they're talking to site selectors or VPs, key factor, and these two things switch back and forth. Transportation logistics is the number one thing that they look for, or workforce. Those are the top two issues right now. And even though they want the incentives, the truth is, just like every business, they want to make sure they can operate, that their market is easily accessible. The incentives just help them because their CFOs are always saying, okay, we're going to pick the one. If you have two equal spots, as far as transportation, workforce, logistics, we're going to pick the spot that will knock down some of our costs for capital. So that's when that plays plays a part in the role of as far as where they decide to go.
So there are times that matters, the lack of incentives that Idaho
Yes,
can offer.
and that's because sometimes, let's say, like for instance, we're very similar to Utah, very similar to Washington in a lot of ways. So some states have more incentives than us. Utah tends to have a ton more incentives than us. So if their decision, let's say everything else is even between the different choices they have between Boise and Salt Lake City. Well, Salt Lake City has more money, so they go, okay, well, we'll go there because they can knock down our capital costs. Operating might be the same, and it is pretty similar for both of the states. They decide that they can get very good workforce in both areas. We have universities and so forth and so on. We've got interstates, so the transportation might be the same, and they may not need all the flights coming out of Salt Lake, so they're okay with Boise. So everything else equal, there's more money at the table coming from another state, they'll go to that state, sometimes. And then sometimes they'll simply decide, you know what, we fit better in Coeur d'Alene, we fit better in Boise because of our company culture. Even though they can't offer us as much, we'll go there.
You mentioned airports and transportation. If we're going to start getting some of these new companies and these techie people coming up here,
Right.
Is it important that we start getting some kind of regional air service in the airport, like United Express or something that can go to Portland, Seattle, the Bay Area?
You mean
Or is-
from Spokane or from our
from
airport
Coeur d'Alene,
here?
from here. Or
You
are we
know-
close enough to Spokane, it doesn't really matter?
I think we're close
if
enough
we
right now.
have very much
yeah.
air service at our airport, because a lot of smaller communities even have
Right.
smaller communities have air
Like-
service, but we're so close to Spokane, we
And
haven't
right
really
now,
developed this,
at least
but-
the companies that I've been talking to, I haven't heard that that's a big factor because we are so close to Spokane and there's so much service, although if we're not careful, we could lose some of that service in Spokane.
Yeah.
So we all have to be well aware that we need to keep using all those air services. At least right now, I haven't heard that as a
Okay.
big critical factor.
Is there any strengths or weaknesses you see in the Coeur d'Alene area, and then anything we can do to help you?
Big strengths
Then I'll
here.
be quiet.
No, that's okay. No, we do have a good corridor as far as, the I-90 corridor, so that's always a big plus for us. I know that the airspace and aviation, I've talked about it because we are so close to the Puget Sound, so I think that's a good possibility. One of the things that I was just talking to the commercial traders about is all the legalizing marijuana in Washington is taking up a lot of big spaces in like the big 20,000 plus manufacturing spaces. And even we are out of 20,000 plus manufacturing spaces over here. So one of the ways that LCDC could help potentially is help us, with the infrastructure if we're bringing a company in. And I know you already do it, so I'm just reinforcing that. So one of the things that actually was Ben that I was exchanging emails with this morning, he said, maybe what we need to start doing, because we are short of spaces, is the next time we have a company coming in that wants a build-to-suit, and let's say they want a 50,000 square foot build-to-suit, maybe we jointly can convince the developer to go do the 50,000, do an extra 20,000 square foot space next to it that allows that either that company to expand or we bring somebody else. at least we have one or two 20,000 square foot manufacturing spaces. But then it's slightly lower risk to them because they have 50,000 already leased. So those might be some of the ways that we can really partner as we start bringing. We have 2 that we're working with right now that will do build to suit. And so maybe that is when we start introducing that. And I just probably need to talk to some builders and developers and see if we can really start doing, Ben's idea of, okay, you need 50, can you tack on a 20? Something like that. Okay. Anything else?
Other questions of Ginny? Well, we want to welcome you again to the best part of the
Yes.
state.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do.
Yes, and it's taking an entire partnership, and we really are working on really improving the partnership and collaboration with everybody. So thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thanks. Thanks.
Thanks, Ginny.
Thank you.
So next on our agenda was a presentation from Greg Green of Fatbeam, which is a fiber optics company. He happened to be called to D.C. to go testify somewhere, so he postponed, so we're not going to hear that today. So that takes us to the BNSF Railroad Right-of-Way Purchase and Sale Agreement Due Diligence Report. Steve Gill of the Department of Environmental Quality, I think, is with us today and is going to bring us up to date on that. Hi, Steve. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
Floor is yours.
I think Mike Gridley has forwarded you some electronic information on that earlier. Last week, we received the initial report on 4th of May. And I brought some short copies. The report itself is nearly 700 pages long. So what I did was condense it into some really quick reads. And I
Executive
see
summary
you
is
do
good.
have you do have a copy of that. So.
That's all only 700
So what we
pages.
had our contractor do, maybe I should start first. How familiar are you guys with the state of Idaho's brownfields
You
program?
might give us a quick rundown on that, Steve.
Good, I brought some of these too. Our brownfields program has been operating now since 2004 in the state of Idaho. And the real reason that we started to look at brownfields was as you get a lot of properties that sit on corners languishing, whether it's a gas station, dry cleaners, an old mill site, smelters, what have you. Banks, lenders, finance companies are now requiring some type of due diligence, all appropriate inquiry, as far as has this business potentially released anything into the environment? Is it there? Is it not there? And so that uncertainty really has, changed the playing field. So the Brownfields program is actually a subsection of CERCLA, which is the Superfund Act. In 2002, the Bush administration signed into law the Small Business Liability Act, which is a portion of CERCLA, but instead of being an enforcement, it is more of an enhancement program and an economic program. So we really look at trying to move properties ahead as quickly as possible, eliminate the uncertainties that might be involved as far as environmental potential contamination, and then also the end result, we track jobs, we track tax creation, and so we have 138 sites right now within the state of Idaho. I cover the 10 top northern counties, so I go down to Riggins and clear up to Port Hill. And I've been doing this for DEQ for nearly a decade now in the Coeur d'Alene Regional Office. So let's fast forward to this project. And in December of last year, you guys received a report from the railroad. Their contractor looked at this small ribbon of right-of-way, the 2.2-mile section, and
on screen for everybody to
yes,
reference there too.
so it would be in the pink. And Mike Gridley communicated with our agency as far as whether we could make some type of decision, such as a no further action or certificate of completion, that this was okay based on these results. Liability has changed as far as looking at data. And one of the things the state of Idaho has done is we've taken over our data quality management from the EPA. This has been a transition during Governor Otter, since he's been our governor, so that we get a little bit more and more control. So we now have data quality management, and so we have to upfront know what the consultant is looking at, and we have to be informed of to make a decision before we actually, can go ahead and say it looks good. So we looked at the data and we thought, well, it wasn't that bad, but we couldn't make a decision. Legally, our hands were tied. So we talked to Mike, and Mike Gridley was familiar with the Brownfields program. He's attended workshops we've had in Coeur d'Alene in 2012. I believe you went to Missoula, didn't you, with us? I don't, maybe?
I wish I had.
Oh, okay, all right.
I went to Sandpoint, I think.
Yeah, Sandpoint, okay, Moscow. So we rolled this into the program in December. We had discussions, with Lcdc and the city, and we did the phase one. Now, the phase one doesn't include any soil borings, any groundwater sampling, or anything like that, but it's based on ASTM practices, and it has a strict historical review, and then uses opinions of professionals as they go out on the site and try to make determinations. As we looked at this old site, a lot of the site's already been developed. So some of the issues that will show up in this corridor, like the old incinerator that's in Post Falls, the old mill burner, the teepee burner that was there. Today, there's two big homes sitting on the water. They pretty much took care of whatever was there. And there were some underground storage tank issues. But within the right-of-way itself, there really isn't much that ever goes on. So the benefits of looking at a Brownfields Phase 1 is that it's really a liability protection mechanism. And I know this is printed very small, but it's a really detailed circular liability, local government acquisitions, and other activities. And what this really does is it describes that by engaging our agency, and we are, by the way, we are fully 100% federally funded under this. We submit a grant each year and renew it. So it's not funded by the Idaho legislature, but it is a grant derived for our agency. For us, we went ahead and what this allows us to actually do is to release the city and Lcdc of liability in the event that something would be discovered when the redevelopment of this occurs. And knowing, when you look at this corridor, a lot of it is pretty well restricted, especially as you get down by the U.S. Bank end and you get towards the Mill River. I mean, it's basically, there's a corridor. And so there isn't a lot that could occur there. There could be some other mechanisms that may be involved with this once this becomes purchased. And so depending how this goes and what type of final end result happens to the right-of-way itself, that's what we looked at on this. What we wanted to do was eliminate the need to ever have to enforce on the city or the Lcdc, and that's what the Phase 1 allows us to do. Let's say in the Stimson property, there's a removal action, and an underground storage tank could be found, which is not uncommon on mill sites. I've done mill sites in Sandpoint and Lewiston and all over the place, and it's not uncommon to find tanks and things buried, and they can even be buried under railroad right-of-ways. But if it was something that required an expensive remedial type of action, which sometimes these type of actions become quite expensive, it's going to go back to Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and it's not on your dime. So
That's part of the Brownfields Act.
that's what the Brownfields does, yeah. And it's basically, and it was really focused on cities and counties and quasi-governmental entities such as URAs to utilize. The city of Moscow, and I didn't bring enough copies for everyone, but the city of Moscow, their URA went ahead and formed a coalition, and they actually are running their own Brownfields program. They've been doing this now since 2009, and they've been very successful. We work cooperatively with EPA on giving them oversight. They went ahead and we assisted them in getting a grant, and I think their initial outlay for a 3-year period was nearly $500,000, and then they have recently received a cleanup grant for a site that the URA went ahead and purchased that had some ag chemical issues, primarily nitrates, phosphates stuck in the soils, but it's on highly visible corner downtown Moscow. So it's another mechanism we have. The last thing I wanted to distribute, and this is the EPA's Brownfields Roadmap. And I don't know how many of you guys were ever in basic computer programming back in the day. You know, you go to college, you take like Fortran or C++, and one of the things you were always warned not to ever do is to try to get into an endless do loop. Well, this, which was made by EPA, it shows, you know, how brownfields can work. And if you notice up in the corner here, there are these little loops with lots of question marks and just over and over and over. So the brownfields program is what we've tried to do within North Idaho and throughout southern Idaho too, is to go ahead and try to take all those question marks and move those properties forward. So that, in a nutshell, describes our program. Looking at this site, there are some potential issues, but that's what the consultants always have to come up with to meet those ASTM guidelines. And it really comes down to when they looked at the soil, the subsurface soil, they went from 18 to 24 inches deep. So there's a chance that something in that upper portion, that upper 6 inches or foot, may have something, may not. I know that at the council meeting last night, Mike Gridley went ahead and he mentioned how through the Stimson stretch, they'll probably do some grading and some gravel and some signs like that. None of that should be an issue at this point in time. And as you go forward with this property, you know, we've sort of laid out what potentials are there, and it's primarily fairly low-key things just done associated with railroad usage. I mean, railroads carried a variety of things. The railroad ties themselves were coated in creosote, which can lead to, sometimes those creosote ties will leach a hydrocarbon into the soil that's called a PAH. But overall, it looks really good. So it's one of the cleaner projects we've seen in a long time. And we've got some fairly dirty projects.
So Steve, just give us an idea of where we are in the time continuum with this Brownfields project.
So as far as where we're at right now, we've completed the phase one. The final document, I talked to our contractor yesterday before the council meeting. He's sending us the electronic version and some printed, and a couple printed ones, one for Lcdc and one for the city to have. We're pretty much completed on the phase one. The timeline begins then. You guys have 180 days that this is a legal document to make the purchase. So that's the real key, is as long as the purchase occurs and within a 180-day time frame now, that whole liability protection goes on. As you guys go forward with this property and you look at the way we divided it into different zones, it really comes up to what I think just communication. And the communication we've had so far with the city, with Lcdc as we went into this initially, and as we've continued to do this, is not an issue. If you guys are considering wanting additional sampling, if you want it, depending on how your needs are, and that is also available through our program. We have already discussed this internally with our contractor, and one of the things, and that was one of the reasons behind putting this into 3 zones, because we have a sampling methodology where we could do it fairly quickly using a pickup truck mounted drill rig, the geoprobe with the 2-inch, and we could do that top foot of soil, 1.5 feet of soil real quickly in a sampling methodology they call integrated sampling, and come up with basically an answer whether there was anything of concern. I know that decisions on what you want to do and when you're going to do it are up to that. We would be available to start that type of sampling after October 1st of this year. So,
But for today's purposes, we're good to go as far as the purchase and still qualifying with the liability
Correct.
removal from the
Yep.
program.
It's, yep.
So it sounds like, a couple of reasons I can think of, you might want to do additional work. One is if, we're going to keep it as some kind of public property and develop it in some fashion. Just want to be sure from a safety standpoint that there's nothing there.
Correct.
That might motivate us to do some additional work, and it sounds like we could get some assistance from the DEQ to do that.
We could do that at no cost.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, or if you had some exchanges going on and maybe a potential buyer wanted us to do it as a condition of the purchase, but we wouldn't have to unless we wanted to
Right.
go ahead with the sale.
Correct. So that's it.
Questions of Steve?
So we've got that 6 months to complete the purchase
Correct.
for the liability. And then the sampling, does that have any effect on our liability, I guess, after, if we do that after the purchase? Okay. If we did find something, it'd go back on the railroad to fix it then?
Right. And
Okay.
if it's let's say we go through and you sample a section, and within your design plan, you're going to have a large playground, and there might be potentially some metals or something that's a little bit elevated above what would be considered a normal background, and so some type of limited removal. On this type of circumstance, a lot of times what you see is you remove that top 3-4 inches. It goes over here. You put it in a big pile. You just sample the big pile, and because then you're looking at it collectively, and generally then the disposal can be fairly, locally. I mean, it could go to Fighting Creek. It could go to Graham Road in Spokane, if it needed to at all. A lot of times, here's a good case point. The Louisiana Pacific Mill site that was in Sandpoint for years, right there on Boyer Avenue. Renova Partners bought that back in 2005, and there's a super one there. And then they put in some apartments, and the apartments are HUD-funded, and they wanted to put geothermal heating. Well, on that property, there had been storage of old treated poles, because Sandpoint at one time used to be the pole treating capital of the West. I was born and raised in Sandpoint. Remember the signs? You'd come in town, pole treating capital of the West, And so the Jocelyn and McFarland pole yards that are there. Well, as we were working with the contractor, and they ended up putting about 70 wells down to 70 to 100 feet, and sure enough, we did get some creosote and some penta. But collectively, we put all those in piles, and when it was done, the sampling said, oh, yeah, there's a little bit, but it's low enough. Went out here, put it in and it's under the parking lot now. So,
Yep, so you encapsulated it.
yes, encapsulated, and that's usually the way we can do it, especially metals and the things that we normally see with a railroad bed are fairly innocuous. And if you were doing a playground, you're going to have a parking lot somewhere anyway, or some type of paved area. So there's ways to work through all of that fairly simply.
So, Steve, would it be fair to say this correctly, that had the DEQ, in analyzing the Phase 1, come up with a severe contamination issue, we wouldn't be here at
Correct.
this point, right? You'd be calling for additional steps.
Yes. We would be immediately saying, well, hold on here. We found this, we found that, we found this. So.
And then if we purchase within 6 months,
Correct.
we have the insurance as far as we don't have liability for the problem, correct? But the seller would.
Yes. Yeah, the liability goes back onto the seller.
And has the railroad agreed that they would accept that?
No, going back to the original negotiation with the railroad,
Okay.
they've contractually obligated us to indemnify them for that.
Okay.
That's why I asked the last question.
You can, which is questionable under state law.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
What
what I
the
thought.
contractual provision is.
Well, yeah, whether or not you can indemnify them is
Yeah,
questionable.
right, because they're obligated under federal law.
Correct.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Is that valid, or does state or federal law require them to clean it up regardless of our contract?
There are cases.
Contract.
Right now, we have over 15,000 brownfields cases across the U.S., and there are many next to the railroads. And cooperatively, I've been working on the Ponderay Bay Trail project, which is that 2-mile corridor between Sandpoint, Ponderay, and Kootenai. And I've been involved with that come September, 9 years. We have put over $1 million of brownfields money into that, and we're now looking at doing an undercrossing. And the railroad has been aware of this the whole time. They know, and they have been a very good partner. And it's Burlington Northern Santa Fe and Montana Rail Link on that line. So while the rules are fairly, here's the railroad, they're this large gorilla in the room, but and our program is with being EPA through DEQ is kind of like a monkey in the room next to the gorilla in the room. But we've had a pretty good relationship with them, and so we haven't had, a significant finding with a railroad is usually something that could be probably dealt with through some type of collaborative agreement. So
I can think of an area where there may be some coal out there. I don't know how dangerous coal is considered. But and are you saying there's some funding through state or federal money for this? Was the only recourse is the only recourse to pursue the railroad for this, or is there some funding for this that could clean it up if we
there's also cleanup funding.
Okay.
So we do have
there's
cleanup
another
grants, and
Okay.
just as we did with the city of Moscow, we worked with them, and they got a cleanup grant, and theirs is about $200,000. And yeah, the cleanup funding can come from a variety of sources too. If it's mine related, we've even tapped into, for the Ponderay Bay Trail project, we've tapped into Idaho Department of Lands Abandoned Mine Lands program. And so as we clean up the old smelter site that sits in Ponderay, what people call Black Rock in Sandpoint, or in Ponderay, we're going to be using abandoned mine land funds for that. So there's a variety of pots to choose from. The state of Idaho, we do have through our voluntary cleanup program, which is a state-funded program, we have what's called the pilot initiative, and we do have a little bit of money left in that. We're hoping for a reauthorization next couple of years, so there's pots of money there too, and usually they're up to about $200,000 for each incident. So,
Thanks.
Other questions of Steve? Steve, I want to thank you on behalf of our board for the department's participation and for all the work you've done on helping us clear the way to acquire this for long-term public use.
okay, and I'd like to thank you guys for engaging us, working with us. It's our first real project in Kootenai County, so it's kind of neat to actually get things going. And big thanks to Mike Gridley, because he was instrumental in engaging us early and letting us get this done in time. So.
That's great. Thanks.
All right.
Very
Thanks
good.
a lot.
Thank you so much. Okay, that takes us to our regular committee reports. First one is Finance Committee.
Mr. Chairman, we will review the Lake District first, if you could go to the balance sheet on the Lake District. During the month, we did have a decrease in cash of $175,771, and that's primarily due to us paying off two loans, one at 516 North Park, one at 213 North 4th Street. These were obligations of the district that the loan was maturing. We had adequate cash. Rather than refinance them, we chose to pay those off. On the liability side of the balance sheet, we have a decrease of principal payable on those two obligations. And between that and our normal payments during the month, we have a decrease of $271,441 during the month. So you can see we used a lot of cash and we reduced some obligations. On the profit and loss statement for, again, the Lake District, you'll see that we did receive tax increment money of $105,622. We had rent income of $12,050, interest income of $775, for a total revenue of $118,447. The typical bills that we had during the month, pretty standard as far as the expenses go. So next, if we could go to the River District, and again, let's start with the balance sheet. The River District also experienced a change in cash. The difference was the River District had an increase in cash of $22,346. Not much activity at all in the River District on any other assets or liabilities. And if you go to the profit and loss statement, you can see why our cash balances went up. And that's because we received tax increment funds of $30,310. We had interest income of $605 for a total of $30,915 during the month. The expenses for the River District, fairly standard as far as split between River and Lake District, and nothing unusual. So you see total expenditures of $9,175, leaving us with a profit for the month of $21,750. So the biggest items that happened this last month really was paying off two notes between the two districts, and then we had some increment funds that came in. Any questions about the financials before we go to the payables? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and go to the payables that Tony has just passed out to you. We'll start with the Elam and Burke bill that we have for the month of April. It's $55.50, so pretty light month in that area. Holly Troxel, General Counsel, also helping us with the Burlington Northern Railroad acquisition, which is part of our legal expenses. You look at the number, it's $2,008 for the month. $356 of that was time spent on the railroad acquisition. Go down to the right-of-way, the Molitor and Associates Consulting, Government Relations, the bill for April, $1,876.44. And then we spent money on the Four Corner Master Planning Initiative, and we have a bill from the Welch-Comer Planning Team of $653.50. And our total budget for that project is $88,665. And then the next item on the payables is Range Northwest. And this company, of course, is helping with our communication strategy. We have a budget, and we have a bill this month of $2,837.50. So the total bills for the month, $20,430.94. Any questions on the payables? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the financials and the payables.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the financials and the payables for the month. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have from the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Rod. Takes us to Housing Committee. Commissioner Goodlander.
I have no report.
Nothing there. Parking Committee. Commissioner Jordan.
Moving right along, Mr. Chairman, I have no report either.
All right. Communications Committee. Commissioner Patzer.
Mr. Chairman, at our June 17th meeting, the Communications Committee will be bringing forward both the name and logo recommendations to this group for your approval as we continue working towards our initiatives to increase public education through our identity change awareness initiative. So next month we'll be bringing that forward with in-depth story to that point as to where we are and our recommendations.
Questions of Dave? Seeing none. Jobs Committee. Commissioner Arman.
No report.
Thank you, Mick. Executive Director's Report. Tony.
Being on that task, Mr. Chairman, I have nothing to report.
All right, so public comment. One more opportunity for public comment. Greg, come on up.
I think you missed the board commission.
Oh, I'll catch Commissioner comments after I switch the order here. Sorry about that. Welcome.
Thank you. Just real quick, again, Greg Johnson from Midtown Association, and we've had several meetings with, well, actually 2 meetings with you, a handful of you in February and March about Midtown, the Midtown project. And in March, there was a letter from the mayor with his regards to the project. April's board meeting here, no report on what's going on with housing and Midtown and all that. So I'm just asking, what's the latest?
I don't think there's much to report. Tony, do you want to tackle that at all? I mean,
The board hasn't reached any consideration or have any really discussions on that. They're still working through all the different data points, basically.
Okay. I would.
I don't think we've heard much of anything new from the housing company.
I would just ask to keep us in the loop.
Of course.
Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. So now, board commissioner comments. Any other comments? Okay. Other than that, my only comment is thanks, Al, for coming down to give us a chance to acknowledge you. We appreciate it. We'll see you around town. And you're welcome back, obviously, anytime.
Yeah, you can still come down every month and sit out there.
All right. Next is executive session. Chair would entertain a motion to enter into executive session to conduct deliberations concerning acquiring an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we'll need a roll call. Of course, that's regarding the BNSF railroad right away.
Correct.
Tony, roll call.
Goodlander.
Yes.
Caldwell.
Yes.
Harmon.
Yes.
Struffel.
Aye.
Hatzer.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Hoskins.
Aye.
Jordan.
Yes.
Motion carries.